The first story, The Christmas Collector. In the quiet town of Pinewood, Christmas Eve was always a magical time. Snow blanketed the streets, and the warm glow of lights spilled from every window. The townsfolk eagerly awaited the arrival of the holiday, little knowing that something sinister lurked in the shadows. The legend of the Christmas Collector had long been whispered among the elders of Pinewood, a dark twist on the tale of Santa Claus. Instead of bringing joy, this figure was said to bring sorrow, visiting families at night to steal away their children. In their place, he left eerily lifelike dolls as replacements, dressed in the same clothes and bearing the same expressions as the children they mimicked. 8-year-old Emily Bennett was excited about Christmas. Her family had decorated their home to perfection, and a roaring fire crackled in the living room. But as the night deepened, Emily's mother, Claire, began to feel uneasy. The antique grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight, and Claire noticed a faint chill in the air despite the fire. When she turned to check on Emily, her heart stopped. Lying in Emily's bed was a doll, a perfect replica of her daughter, down to the tiniest freckle on her cheek. The doll's unblinking eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Claire's scream shattered the silence, and her husband Mark came running. "What's wrong?" he asked, but his voice faltered when he saw the doll. "Where's Emily?" They searched the house, but Emily was nowhere to be found. On the mantel they discovered a single present wrapped in crimson paper. Inside was a note scrawled in elegant handwriting. "A gift for your memories. Your child is now part of my collection." Claire wasn't the only one to lose her child that night. By morning, similar stories emerged across Pinewood, children gone, replaced by uncanny dolls and cryptic notes. The police were baffled, chalking it up to a cruel prank, but Claire knew better. Desperate for answers, she turned to her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Halloway, who was known for her strange stories. "It's him," Mrs. Halloway whispered, "the Christmas Collector. He comes once every generation, choosing children for his twisted collection. No one knows why, but they say he keeps them forever, locked away in his workshop." Claire's determination hardened. If this collector was real, she would find him. That evening, Claire prepared. She left the doll in Emily's bed, hoping it would lure the collector back. Armed with a flashlight and a heavy poker from the fireplace, she waited in the shadows. At the stroke of midnight, the temperature plummeted. The sound of sleigh bells echoed faintly outside. The front door creaked open, though no footsteps approached. A figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, gaunt man dressed in a tattered red coat. His face was obscured by a shadowy hood, but his gnarled hands carried a large, empty sack. Claire's heart pounded as the figure moved toward Emily's room. She followed silently, gripping the poker tightly. When the collector leaned over the bed, Claire lunged. "Where is my daughter?" she screamed. The collector turned, and for the first time, she saw his face, an impossibly pale visage with hollow black eyes that seemed to devour the light. "She is where she belongs," he rasped, his voice like the crunch of snow underfoot. Claire swung the poker, but it passed through him as if he were made of smoke. The collector raised a hand, and Claire felt herself lifted off the ground, unable to move. "Your love for her is admirable," he said, "but she is mine now." In a flash, Claire found herself transported to a place that defied logic, a cavernous workshop filled with rows of glass cases. Inside each case was a child, frozen in time, their faces twisted in expressions of fear or sadness. "Why?" Claire demanded, tears streaming down her face. The collector gestured to the cases. "I preserve them. They are perfect this way, untouched by the world's cruelty." "Is that not a gift?" "No," Claire screamed. "You're a monster." The collector tilted his head, as if considering her words. "Perhaps, but I am also a savior, in my own way." Claire's eyes darted around the workshop, searching for Emily. She spotted her daughter in a case near the back, her small hands pressed against the glass. "Emily," Claire cried, rushing toward her. The collector stepped between them. "You cannot take her. She belongs here." Claire dropped to her knees. "Take me instead," she begged. "Let her go and add me to your collection." The collector hesitated, his hollow eyes narrowing. "A rare offer," he said, "but I accept." With a wave of his hand, the glass case holding Emily shattered. The little girl stumbled out, dazed but unharmed. Claire hugged her tightly, whispering, "Run, don't look back." As Emily fled, Claire felt herself being pulled into one of the empty cases. The last thing she saw was the collector's twisted smile. When Emily returned home, she found her father frantically searching for them. "Where's your mother?" he asked. Emily held up a small, beautifully wrapped present. Inside was a porcelain doll, a perfect replica of Claire. In the years that followed, Emily grew up with the doll always watching from its place on the shelf. Every Christmas Eve, she would hear the faint sound of sleigh bells, a chilling reminder of the night her mother sacrificed everything to save her. And in the town of Pinewood, the legend of the Christmas collector lived on, warning parents to guard their children on the most magical and dangerous night of the year. The second story. The Christmas Carnage. The town of Frosthaven had always embraced the festive season with unmatched vigor. Every year, it transformed into a winter wonderland, with streets adorned in glittering lights, carolers spreading cheer, and the centerpiece, a towering Christmas tree in the town square. But this year, the joyous atmosphere was tinged with unease. For weeks, rumors had spread of a masked figure seen lurking in the shadows, watching the festivities from afar. Some dismissed it as a prankster, while others swore the figure felt wrong. He was dressed like a clown, but with a grotesque, twisted Christmas twist. His costume a patchwork of red and green, his face painted with smeared white makeup, and a blood-red grin that never seemed to fade. The first incident occurred on December 1st. A group of teenagers had gone missing after leaving a holiday party. Their abandoned car was found on the edge of the woods, covered in bloody handprints. Then, days later, the bodies were discovered, arranged in a macabre tableau, posed like mannequins in a grotesque nativity scene. Holly, a local college student home for the holidays, had heard the stories but didn't take them seriously. She was more focused on enjoying her time with her friends before heading back to the grind of her studies. On Christmas Eve, she and her friends decided to meet at Frosthaven's annual winter festival. The festival was in full swing when Holly arrived. Kids laughed as they skated on the ice rink. Couples sipped hot cocoa, and the smell of roasted chestnuts filled the air. Holly joined her friends near the Ferris wheel, their laughter blending with the cheerful music. But amidst the joy, Holly noticed something strange, a figure standing motionless near the carousel. He was taller than the average man, his gangly frame hunched unnaturally. His costume was an unsettling blend of clown and Santa, complete with a pointed hat and jingling bells. His painted smile was too wide, his eyes too hollow. He held a large candy cane, but its sharp, jagged edges glinted ominously in the light. "Hey, do you see that guy?" Holly asked her friend Jenna, pointing toward the figure. Jenna laughed. "Oh, it's probably just some actor trying to scare people. You know how they love doing that stuff around here." Holly wasn't so sure. As the night wore on, the figure seemed to follow them, always lingering at the edge of the crowd. When Holly finally mustered the courage to approach him, he vanished into the throng. By midnight, the festival was winding down. Holly and her friends decided to head back to Jenna's house for a sleepover. The streets were eerily quiet as they walked, the festive lights casting long shadows across the snow. That's when they heard it, a high-pitched jingling sound, like sleigh bells, but faster, more frantic. The group stopped, glancing around nervously. "Is someone there?" Holly called out, her breath visible in the freezing air. The jingling stopped. For a moment there was only silence. Then from the alleyway, the figure emerged. He moved with an unnatural grace, his head tilting from side to side as if studying them. Holly's heart raced as she noticed the candy cane in his hand was now streaked with something dark. "Run!" she screamed, and the group scattered. Holly sprinted down the icy street, her boots slipping on the snow. Behind her, the jingling grew louder, accompanied by a soft, wheezing laugh. She ducked into a narrow alley, pressing herself against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. The clown stalked past the alley, his bells jingling with every step. Holly held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice her. But then, he stopped. Slowly, he turned his head, his unblinking eyes locking onto hers. She bolted, her legs burning as she ran. She burst into a nearby convenience store, startling the lone cashier. "Call the police," she gasped. "There's a man. He's trying to kill us." The cashier blinked in confusion, then froze as the jingling sound filled the store. The clown stepped through the door, his candy cane now dripping crimson. What followed was a blur of chaos. The clown lunged at the cashier, his movements erratic yet terrifyingly precise. Holly grabbed a display rack and hurled it at him, buying herself enough time to escape through the back door. Outside, the snowstorm had intensified, and the visibility was poor. Holly stumbled through the streets, her tears freezing on her cheeks. She found herself in the town square, the massive Christmas tree towering above her. The jingling was closer now, almost mocking. She turned to see the clown emerging from the storm, his grin wider than ever. Desperate, Holly grabbed a string of lights from the tree and wrapped it around her hands. When the clown charged, she swung the lights, catching him across the face. He staggered back, his painted grin briefly replaced by a snarl. Using the momentary distraction, Holly climbed the Christmas tree, hoping to put some distance between herself and the clown. From her perch, she spotted the police arriving in the square, their flashlights cutting through the snow. The clown noticed them too. With a final haunting laugh, he disappeared into the storm, his bells jingling one last time. The aftermath of that night left Frosthaven shaken. Holly and her friends were the only survivors, and the clown was never caught. The townsfolk avoided the festival the following year, the memory of the Christmas carnage too fresh. But every so often, someone would claim to hear the faint sound of sleigh bells, mingled with a chilling laugh, reminding Frosthaven that the horrors of that Christmas were far from over. The third story, the Toymaker's Curse. The small, snow-dusted town of Everpine was known for its centuries-old Christmas tradition, a grand toy giveaway orchestrated by the reclusive toymaker, Nicholas Vane. Every December, children from miles around would gather at Vaughn's workshop, a towering Gothic building that loomed at the edge of the forest. Each child left with a handcrafted toy, intricate and lifelike, bearing the signature engraving, NV. For generations, Vane's toys were a cherished part of Christmas in Everpine, their craftsmanship unmatched. But as years passed, whispers of unease began to grow. Parents swore the toys moved when unobserved. Some claimed they whispered in the dead of night. And then, children began to vanish. This Christmas, 10-year-old Max Parker was among the eager children waiting outside Vane's workshop. His younger sister, Lily, held tightly to his hand as the doors creaked open, revealing Nicholas Vane. Vane was an unsettling figure, tall and thin, with a face as pale as the snow. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed to see through the children as they rushed inside. His smile was fixed, wide and toothy, but devoid of warmth. Inside, the workshop was a wonderland of toys. Wooden soldiers stood at attention. Porcelain dolls lined the shelves, and intricate clockwork animals whirred and clicked. Max and Lily wandered the aisles, their eyes wide with awe. When it was Max's turn, Vane handed him a soldier doll. For the brave. Vane said, his voice soft and lilting. To Lily, he gave a porcelain ballerina, for the pure. Their mother was waiting outside, and as the family walked home, Max couldn't shake the strange feeling that Vaughn's eyes had lingered on them too long. That night, Max awoke to a faint tapping sound. He turned to see the soldier doll standing upright on his desk, its painted face twisted into a sneer. He blinked, certain he was imagining things, but then the doll tilted its head. "Brave enough for this?" it hissed, its voice a chilling mockery of Vane's. Max screamed, and his mother burst into the room, flipping on the light. The doll was back on the desk, motionless. It was moving," Max stammered. His mother sighed. "You had a nightmare. Go back to sleep." In the next room, Lily clutched her ballerina doll tightly. The doll's porcelain face seemed softer, almost alive. Lily swore she felt it breathing. By morning, the toys were gone. Max searched the house frantically. His mother thought he was being obsessive, but Max knew something was wrong. When Lily didn't come down for breakfast, their mother went upstairs to check on her. Her scream echoed through the house. Max raced up the stairs and found his mother standing in Lily's room, clutching the ballerina doll. Lily was nowhere to be found. In the doll's porcelain hands was a single tiny braid of Lily's hair. Desperate for answers, Max returned to Vane's workshop that night. The snowstorm was fierce, but he pushed forward, determined to confront the toy maker. The doors were unlocked, and the workshop was dark and silent. Max crept through the aisles, the toys now seeming far more sinister in the shadows. In the center of the workshop, he found a staircase spiraling downward. The air grew colder as he descended, the smell of decay thickening with every step. At the bottom, Max entered a vast, cavernous space filled with towering shelves. On each shelf sat children, frozen in doll-like poses. Their faces were pale and lifeless, yet their eyes moved, darting around in silent terror. Max's stomach turned as he recognized Lily among them, her tiny hands clutching the ballerina doll. "You shouldn't be here," came Vane's voice from the shadows. Max spun around to see the toy maker standing behind him, his face twisted into something monstrous. His once piercing blue eyes were now black voids, his teeth sharp and jagged. "Why are you doing this?" Max demanded, tears streaming down his face. Vane stepped closer, his movements unnaturally fluid. "Each toy is a piece of my soul," he said. "To craft perfection, I must feed on innocence. Your sister is my latest masterpiece." "No!" Max shouted, grabbing a nearby wooden soldier. He hurled it at Vane, but the toy maker merely laughed. "You cannot stop me, child, but perhaps you'd like to join her." The shelves began to creak as the children-turned dolls started to stir. Their porcelain faces cracked, revealing hollow expressions of despair. They reached for Max, their movements jerky and puppet-like. Max dodged their grasping hands and ran deeper into the cavern, his heart pounding. He found a large furnace at the back, its flames roaring. Vane appeared beside him, his smile widening. "You cannot destroy my work." Max grabbed the ballerina doll from Lily's frozen hands. "Maybe I can destroy you." He hurled the doll into the furnace. Vane let out an ear-piercing shriek as cracks began to spread across his body. The workshop trembled as the dolls collapsed, their spell broken. Max pulled Lily free from the shelf and carried her up the stairs as the cavern crumbled behind them. By morning, the workshop was reduced to rubble, and the Parker family moved far away from Everpine. But the legend of Nicholas Vane didn't end there. Every Christmas, strange packages began appearing on doorsteps in distant towns. Inside were toys, each bearing the signature engraving, NV. And once again, children began to vanish.